Dr. Wiggins was always very quiet spoken, and he always gave whomever he talked to, whether it was a student or a colleague, he always let them express their ideas of whatever might be on their mind. He didn't just take over the conversation, and he always included everyone. And Mrs. Wiggins also, she was pretty firm in school, but there was a reason that she was doing that. She had a purpose. She wanted to make sure we were ready for the world when we left school and be able to be good citizens. There are times when I really miss them because after I got married and had my daughter, I was so strict with her. And he would tell me, you don't have to be so strict with her. I just wanted her to be somebody that we could be proud of and that they would be proud of. So anyway, they were an inspiration to me. Special people, that's all I can say.
He was a Renaissance man with 4 college degrees. She was at all times a lady, a beloved teacher, a caring mentor, and a stalwart citizen of her community. Together and without fanfare, they enriched the town of Columbia immeasurably. This is their story. She was born in 1907 and grew up in Kirksville in Columbia. He was born in 1905 and grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. She would graduate from the prestigious Howard University in 1928, and he with a bachelor's in chemistry from Wilberforce University in Ohio in 1929. Having not yet met, in the fall of 1929, both were hired to the faculty of the segregated Fred Douglass School in Columbia. He, dashing and handsome, would teach math, physics, chemistry, French, and coach football and track. She, pretty, soft-spoken, and whip-smart, taught English, American literature, and physical education. Roland and Ruth soon became good friends and eventually were dating. She formed a Girl Scout troop and a pep squad at the school, and he was coaching the Bulldogs to state championships in football and basketball in the early 1930s. In 1933, frustrated with the difficulty of scheduling athletic contests and finding qualified referees for his Bulldog teams, Roland founded the Missouri State Negro Athletic Association. In 1934, Roland organized a track meet and brought in a guest for a special appearance, a young sprinter. His name was Jesse Owens. In hindsight, it's apparent that Roland was more than just an inspired educator and coach. He had a knack for organizing, public relations, and networking too. In 1937, he was appointed supervisor for all Negro schools in the state of Missouri, and later appointed as the Missouri State Coordinator for training Negro men for national defense industries. Shortly after Pearl Harbor, and after having served on the Selective Service Board, Roland chose to enlist in the war effort. He asked to be assigned to a chemical warfare training service, and for 2 years he taught civilians to be chemical warfare technicians. When he left the Army, he knew he wanted to go into medicine. Roland was accepted to Meharry Medical College, a historically black medical school in Nashville, and in 1947, at the age of 42, Roland earned his medical degree. After Roland completed his first internship, he realized he wanted to specialize in cardiology, but those internships were hard to find. After driving back to Columbia to see Ruth and consulting with her about his future, he decided to go to Europe. She drove him to Lambert Airfield one night in the summer of 1948, and he flew back to New York, then sailed for France. He enrolled at the University of Paris and was assigned to work for 2 years in internal medicine under the direction of the grandson of the famous Louis Pasteur. In just a year's time, Roland was appointed to the faculty of the University of Paris Medical School. After 2 years in Paris, Roland was restless, and he applied for a Fulbright research scholarship from the U.S. State Department and was soon accepted. However, the cardiology internships he desired were in Scotland, Sweden, and the Netherlands. And so, he uses the Fulbright scholarship to spend nearly all of 1951 and 1952 studying in premier clinics in Edinburgh, Stockholm, Amsterdam, and London. By the early 1950s, Ruth had established herself as a beloved teaching veteran inside the halls of the Fred Douglass School. She loved her work, and her students loved her. She was strict, but gentle and caring. Her students hated to let her down.
I have to go back to the beginning of me knowing who Ruth Dobie was. Ruth Dobie was my mother's first teacher. After she graduated from Howard University, she came back home to Columbia. Her first teaching assignment was in Rocheport, Missouri, and she was the teacher for my mother's first class. So we always had that in common, that Miss Wiggins was her first teacher. And the impact was that you did not slump, play when it was seriously about your education. That's what she instilled from back when my mom was there. And then as we've grown over the years, she traced herself back to Columbia, and my aunt was in her homeroom. Douglas had homerooms. I don't know if other schools did, but in the morning when you came to school, you went to your homeroom when you got to high school, and you had your class togetherness there, and then you went to your classes. And lo and behold, my aunt graduated, and guess what? I came into high school that year, and Miss Wiggins became my homeroom teacher. So I had her another 4 years. What she did for all of us students was she made us understand that education was important, that you're not going to play, you're going to be little ladies in my class.
I've spoken with graduates from Douglas High School when it was segregated. And I've never heard anything outside of the fact that they had a high quality, phenomenal educational experience while they were in this building. That's part of that historical lineage that when African Americans were offered the opportunity for education, we always did something that excelled. And it's like they left it in the fiber at Douglas High School. It's in the building, it's in the walls, it's in the foundation.
Later in her retirement, she said, "I just cared for children, and I let them know that they were just as smart as any child in this city." In the 1930s and 1940s, Columbia public school teachers risked almost certain termination if they chose to marry. Ruth loved her job so much that marriage was out of the question for a long time, but that would change in 1951. It was the European vacation season, and Roland was lonesome. He called Ruth and said, "If we're going to get married, let's do it now so we can share these experiences in Europe." Ruth was soon on a French ocean liner. On September 21st, 1951, they were married by an American Episcopal minister in a friend's home in Paris. They honeymooned on the French Riviera and in Spain. They enjoyed 4 weeks of sightseeing, museums, ocean shores, lunching with the locals, and the occasional bullfight.
They were a loving couple. When you saw them, it was like you could see that they really, really cared for each other and took care of each other. When we saw the pictures of their marriage and, in the European, all of that, and we go, wow, this is special. They were a special couple.
In 1953, Roland returned to the States and took a 4-week-long course at Harvard University that summer. The couple finally settled together in Columbia in 1954. He began seeing patients in Columbia and would continue his private practice for many years. 10% of his patients were white. Roland maintained an incredibly busy schedule. He became an active member of the medical staff at both Boone County Hospital and the University of Missouri Hospital, and is probably the first Black physician on the staff at both hospitals. He became the president of Columbia's NAACP chapter, vice president of the Family YMCA, a member of the Greater Columbia Planning Committee, and at the urging of his patients and supporters, is the first Black Columbian to run for the Columbia School Board twice, but unsuccessfully each time. In 1961, Ruth completed her 32nd year of teaching at Douglas when the high school was closed and students were integrated with students at Hickman High School. Ruth would move to Hickman too and continue teaching there for another 16 years before retiring at the age of 70. In the 1970s, Roland worked first as the Director of University Health Services at the University of Southern Illinois and later on the staff at the Truman Medical Center in Kansas City. Roland repeatedly turned down opportunities to build a much more lucrative practice in Chicago. In reply, he would joke, "Why should I move to a big city when I can enjoy the privilege of losing school board elections in Columbia?" Throughout his life, Roland was known to be many things, among them an impeccable dresser and a reserved and modest man. He was also known as someone who fought calmly and steadily for better race relations, and for possessing a quiet tenacity that brought him from being a carpenter's son in South Carolina to being recognized as one of Missouri's top-flight physicians. He was quoted in the National Magazine of the NAACP in 1960 as saying, "I want to practice medicine in a nice community. You have to work hard to make it a nice community, as hard as you do to practice medicine. I don't care who gets the credit. If Columbia gets better, we all get better." On his death, Ruth said of him, "His great passions were education and medicine. He never stopped going to school. He never stopped taking classes." In 1997, on the occasion of Ruth's 90th birthday, a large celebration took place at Douglas School. One former student who was unable to attend wrote to Mrs. Wiggins that week and said in her letter, "Although I never acquired a college degree, I was able to utilize what I learned from you to obtain good employment. I'm pleased to tell you I have just retired after serving for 11 years as the executive secretary to the president of the University of Southern California."
I think, very candidly, it's about time that they be recognized, and the Historical Society being very inclusive now of the people that really are exceptional in their fields and doing things that are accomplishments that we all enjoy. And I think that the history that we learned from the Wiggins is that being humble, being knowledgeable, and being always on time and ready to do whatever's needed is what we were taught from them.
Ruth and Roland Wiggins were boundary breakers. They were humble giants who served and led by example, and in doing so impacted the lives of tens of thousands of people, particularly here in Columbia. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed friends, please welcome to the Boone County Hall of Fame, Dr. Roland and Mrs. Ruth Wiggins.